The Half-Life series has many iconic creatures, locations, and enemies. In the background, however, there was something always in motion. An empire that jumped from universe to universe in their conquest to dominate all sentient life. This union of enslaved species under the banner of one were the perpetrators of untold torment, horrors, and chaos. A multi-dimensional collection of biologically adapted species who sought to invade, conquer, and adapt. What makes this empire one of the most terrifying entities in video game history? What was the worst thing they did to humanity, and what was their ultimate goal? Here, we explore the lore and story behind the Combine Empire in Half-Life. Now, where do we begin? Well, at the beginning. Very little is known about the origin of what we, humanity, now call the Combine. They would likely have begun just like we did, a species who grew intelligent on their homeworld. They would have looked out to the stars and, as they grew and evolved, learned as much as they could about the world and universe. At one point, their technology became incredibly complex, in which they mastered dark energy and used it as a power source. This early race of the Combine was not a peaceful species, and they had one goal in mind: to conquer all life. It could be theorized that on their world, they would have also experimented with and biologically adapted the lesser life forms around them to serve a purpose in their goal, to become soldiers or tools in an army. As their scientists used their dark energy power technology to create weapons, structures, and tools, these armies would have likely left their world to conquer other worlds in local space to bring back resources and new species to adapt. All of this is only theorized, as the Combine were not forthcoming with information to humanity. But what is known is that one of their biggest technological advancements came when they discovered how to generate portals to tunnel through into alternate universes, realities, and dimensions. The name the Aleph universe was used at one point in the Half-Life 2 beta. This could have been the name of the Combine's home universe or overworld. Whether these are different or one and the same is also unknown. The name has also not been confirmed to be canon. Powered by a dark fusion reactor, Combine armies were sent through into these new places to conquer and assimilate the life they found. As the Combine broke through into incredible new dimensions, realities, and universes, they discovered ancient satellites colonized by sentient fungi, gas giants inhabited by vast meteorological intelligences, worlds stretched thin across the membranes where dimensions intersected. But in all of this wonder, all they brought with them was pain, chaos, and death. The original species of the Combine, and with it, the race at the top of their structure, is unknown. But as time passed and they conquered worlds, they continued to learn and grow. They overwhelmed each world they encountered, destroyed the strongest of their forces, and they began their process. They forced the intelligent life to submit and comply, set up bases to govern them from citadels powered by dark energy, explored the world for natural resources to send to their overworld, learned their technology, and experimented with anything they found of use, both in biology and technology. During which, the Combine encountered the species that were once the Strider, Gunship, Dropship, Hunter, and more. These became units in their armies to conquer more worlds, but they had once been creatures with their own worlds, biologically mutilated and augmented into tools, workers, and soldiers. Striders and gunships became essential in their invasions as they took out armies with ease from afar. Dropships brought in reinforcements when needed, and hunters brutally attacked and massacred whatever they were ordered to kill on the front lines. As humans, we call them the Combine for 3 reasons. It is a term they accept, they are a combination of the species they had enslaved and crafted into their forces, and finally, they harvested what they found into something perfect, in their eyes, to fulfill their goal. To explore just how cruel and barbaric the creation of these synthetic creatures were, the gunship is a perfect example. It looks like they were once water-based creatures similar to the whales of Earth. During the Combine's experimentation of what they could be in their army, they brought them out of the water and transformed them into armoured aircrafts with a rotor installed into their flesh and skin. To assault the targets of the Combine, a heavy pulse cannon and warp cannon were also crafted onto them. They were turned into living weapons. These were just one of many of the Combine's attempts at forced evolution. On Earth, we likely only saw a fraction of the monstrosities the Combine created. For some time, the Combine conquered, plundered, and assimilated worlds across the multiverse. Before the species discovered what had discovered them, it was too late. They were smarter and stronger. The Combine only grew stronger upon each successful conquest as they acquired more resources for their overworld, more technology and insight into the universe that the species had uncovered, and new units and mindless drones for their cause. There were, however, some who just barely survived the horrors of the Combine. This multi-dimensional alien empire had destroyed worlds on their goal for ultimate power and control. With their armies of synths, on one of their conquests, they discovered the homeworld of the Nylanth species. In a genocide that killed countless, only one escaped, but not before they could experiment on it. Scars and surgical lines filled its body, and it floated thanks to what looked like a levitation device installed on its bottom half. Brutal. To escape, the creature was lucky enough to discover a connection to a border world between dimensions, Xen. This place moved between universes, connected to them, allowed light to move over, and then moved on to the next. It also meant that when the Combine attempted to track down this survivor, they could not. The Combine also assaulted the world of the Vortigaunt, in which some of them also escaped to Xen. The Vortigaunt were a pretty big loss for the Combine, as this species had the ability to commune with a source known as the Vortessence. This gave them the ability to communicate with each other through it, generate energy, and for some, explore future versions of timelines. If the Combine were able to capture them, these would essentially work as living batteries, but for now, they were lost to Xen. The Combine did not like to lose, and as they ventured across the multiverse on their quest, they also sought out those who had evaded them. The structure of the Empire is not known currently, but it is believed that the Combine Advisor may be at the top, the planners and commanders. As with most lore in this universe, a lot of information is missing. There is, however, a great idea of where the Combine Advisor came from and what their ultimate use was. Breengrub is a Twitter account run by Mark Laidlaw, the writer behind the story we know of the Half-Life series. Now, this Twitter account and these tweets are not considered to be canon, but they do offer an interesting perspective of what the Combine Advisor once were and how they were used in the Combine Empire. It tells the story of the Shu Ulathoi, a name that the Vortigaunt called the Combine Advisors canonically. As it goes, the Shu Ulathoi were a species of dreamers. Their world existed within a globular cluster and was home to extreme erratic seasons with lethal properties. Because of this, in their larval stage, they were buried in the ground and their physical bodies lay dormant for extended periods of time. Yet, it was in this dormant form that they thrived. They had a natural racial telepathy, and they created a psychic, dreamer's world with philosophers, scientists, sages, and composers of intricate art forms that existed only within their minds, an invisible culture that persisted for aeons. When the Shu-Ulathoi were ready to hatch, their psychic strength was so strong that they could imprint upon their cells and dictate their new form. Again, this has not been confirmed to be canon, but the interesting part is what happened when the Combine of this story discovered these larval Shu-Ulathoi. Upon the invasion of the species, the Combine could not penetrate the Shu-Ulathoi physically, so they used their technologies to weaponize their thoughts and introduce them into the psychic dreamer's world. In doing so, the world corrupted, but the Shu-Ulathoi had no idea how their world had fallen. When they awoke, they discovered the Combine. Just a lucky few took flight to freedom and escaped, but the majority were taken. Having been discovered and understood the process of parasitic engineering within the minds of the Shu-Ulathoi, they adapted it and developed a way to imprint a conscious mind of their choosing on the exhumed bodies of the Shu-Ulathoi, and later, those synthetically created in Combine nurseries. Now, why is this important to the Combine's story? Well, it is stated that when the Combine conquered worlds and captured the intelligent civilizations on them, they were able to copy the minds of the best and brightest. With these, they imprinted them in grubs to be of use. In their engineering of these creatures, they also utilized their psychic ability to fly and severely injure anything around them. In their assault of worlds, these Combine advisors, advisor being a great way to describe a bright mind stolen from those they had conquered, were essential in the planning and high-level function of the Combine's empire while the biological weapons did their bidding. I would also speculate that the Combine maybe imprinted the minds of their original species onto these advisors in a way to be stronger, a part of a psychic network with every advisor, and most importantly, to, in a sense, become immortal. Maybe they understood they had outgrown their original form. This is just a theory. Breengrub is not considered canon, but the lore in these tweets perfectly matches up with what we know about the advisors, and the fact that Mark Laidlaw wrote them was just too important not to mention. There is a lot more to the Breengrub tweets, but I have highlighted the most important points that relate to the Combine. I do have a full video on it in the description. As of now, the Combine Advisor is the highest ranking Combine unit in their army that we know of, but then again, as a human, we have only seen what they have allowed us to see. Outside of the madness and terror that was the Combine invasion of the multiverse, in our universe, humanity sought to understand and hopefully one day explore the space around us. There were several companies working with that goal in mind, to understand, observe, and explore. Of note, Aperture Science and the Black Mesa Research Corporation were two of the strongest, and they began a long-standing rivalry. Over in the New Mexico desert, the Black Mesa Research Facility explored various fields of scientific endeavors. One of these was teleportation technology. Over their time, they had managed to develop a way to teleport from one location of Black Mesa to another, primarily in the Lambda Research Core, something that even the Combine had not mastered. While the Union could tunnel into new universes, they could not teleport from one region to another within them. This was a technology they sought after. In another experiment, the Black Mesa team did something impressive. They opened up a connection not into their world, but a border world, Xen. They had created a cross-dimensional portal. This was an incredibly important moment in human history, a moment that only few would ever know of. Over some time, Black Mesa sent through survey teams to explore Xen. They learned that this was a border world between dimensions and that all life here had come from countless worlds and merged into a thriving yet dangerous ecosystem. This exploration of Xen was incredible for our kind. However, it led to something disastrous. A resonance cascade after an experiment went horribly wrong. This event pulled through the creatures of Xen to Earth. This also alerted the Combine of humanity's existence. Just like they had done to countless species and worlds before, they prepared for and sent through an invasion as they used their portal technology to tunnel into our universe. When they were ready, they began a mass genocide across the globe. In just 7 hours, Dr. Wallace Breen, on behalf of the United Nations, offered our submission in return for our lives and servitude to what the newspapers called the Combine, a name they appeared to accept from us. While this was a regular conquest for the extra-dimensional alien empire, this was the beginning of something completely new for humanity. This was their introduction to alien life, and it was the worst case they could have hoped for. This was a completely new age and era for humanity. This universal union saw something in this species, and having agreed to peace of sorts, as long as they were in control, the Combine appointed Dr. Wallace Breen as Earth's administrator, the human in charge of keeping his kind in line. To do this, he was given direct contact with the Combine advisors. In essence, he did what they ordered. He did not have any control in their eyes. He was just someone who did what they ordered. His world had fallen so far. His kind had lost millions or even billions of their own, but Wallace saw promise in what the Combine was and what they could offer. He saw them as humanity's benefactors, a way to jump ahead in knowledge and evolution. To control their newly acquired species, the Combine had what remained of the human population transported like cattle into settlements that they controlled completely, one of which was labelled City 17 in Eastern Europe. In the centre, a power core was teleported into the city, and around it, they began the construction of a citadel, a structure almost identical to many found on the Combine overworlds. What remained of the rest of the planet is unknown. The Combine did their best to reduce any knowledge that our kind had of their actions or structure, but from the research of Dr. Isaac Kleiner, he believed that every settlement across the globe had a citadel. From these, the Combine governed the population below, constructed units and reinforcements, communicated with and travelled between Earth and the Combine overworld, and finally, offered a place for Wallace Breen to stay as he was relocated across the wasteland of Earth to do his job. With humanity sealed within their city-sized prisons, the Combine made their changes to the planet itself. To introduce themselves properly and keep order through Breen, the Combine relied mostly on fear and paranoia, but they also put their mark on the regions accessible to humanity. As the Combine, they wanted us to unite with and work with them for their goals. They branded the creatures they created. On posters, propaganda, and generally, Combine imagery in the cities and Combine facilities, they placed the claw logo, a sharp claw with clear edges similar to that of the Combine's aggressive architecture. In the center, a circle. This likely represented Earth or the other planets they conquered. They were larger, stronger, and were able to hold these worlds in their grasp. What is interesting about several of these is that they placed a white dove above this logo. Historically, in human culture, it was a symbol of hope, honesty, purity, and peace. Absolutely something they were not. Still, it was interesting to see that they explored human culture and adapted it into their messaging and psychological warfare. For those under the control of the Combine, they may have even been given the opportunity to learn their alphabet. Wherever humanity went, the Combine was there in some form. We were not there to experience what the Combine did to the homeworld of the gunship, dropship, advisor, or hunter, so we cannot compare just how awful their experience was. However, on Earth, there was suffering and great change. To fuel their war machine, the Combine made changes to Earth. They made use of a giant teleporter that essentially acted as a drain in the ocean. This drain transported the water to other Combine territories across the multiverse. Across the wasteland of the planet, ships dropped to the seabed, and what remained of the oceans became infested by leeches that ate all water life they encountered, as well as any biological life that entered the water. In the Combine's adaptation of the planet, they did come across one major issue. Not the humans, but what had come from Xen during the portal storms after the Resonance Cascade. Headcrabs, barnacles, ichthyosaur, antlion, and other hostile life took control of the territories outside of the Combine-controlled settlements. Of note, the antlion were very aggressive. As for the rest of the animals who had once lived in these regions, they were wiped out. From Xen also came the Vortigaunt, who had hidden away from the Combine for so long, but the Resonance Cascade had brought them back into the Combine's sights. With the planet under their control and a new source of natural resources, the Combine looked at what they could do to the human and Vortigaunt population. How could they adapt them and make them useful in their army and workforce? Nova Prospect was once a human prison. The Combine kept the structure's original purpose to hold those who disobeyed their orders. They also chose it as one of the locations they used to transform the human population into something useful. This was seen as a place of nightmares to the human and Vortigaunt. We will get into that a little later. Within the settlements, the humans believed that their new leaders put something in the water to make them forget. While not confirmed completely, it would make sense. If the Combine could confuse and manipulate the minds of humanity to make them forget and disorient them, maybe they would forget why they hated their rulers so much. On top of this, the Combine also activated a global suppression field. In essence, it prevented certain protein chains important to the creation of life from forming. This was just one aspect of how powerful and intelligent the Combine were. Due to this, there would be no new human life, only what our benefactors allowed us to keep from what already existed. Of course, in such awful and anxiety-ridden living conditions, there were some who became Combine collaborators. They reported their neighbors' activities in return for additional rations and standing with the Empire. This was an issue for a small resistance that had begun to form. It was smart on the side of the Combine, as this fostered a society of fear and paranoia ruled by the human Combine police force. Big Brother was always watching. But what did the human arm of the Overwatch consist of? Under Dr. Wallace Breen's guidance of his planet, the human arm of the Combine's army were given instructions through the Overwatch. These human units came in different forms based on how they were adapted, and each one was important in the control of the wider human population. For the humans who wanted to work with the Combine or explore the benefits of cooperation, they took the first step to become a part of the Civil Protection, the Combine's human police force. These were still human with no to little changes to them. They were given additional rations and better accommodation in return for their service of patrolling the streets, raiding the homes of those they suspected of being a member of the Resistance, and generally keeping the population in line. If they decided to submit further to the Combine's goal, they were given the opportunity to go through forced evolution. Our kind began around 3,975 million years ago. We evolved through countless forms before giving rise to the Hominidae family. These were primates such as chimpanzees, orangutans, and gorillas. That was around 25 million years ago. From there, it took the tens of millions of years for the Homo sapiens sapiens, modern humans, those being us, to emerge. But in just a matter of hours to years, some of us evolved further into the Homo sapiens combinus, a transformation made possible by the knowledge and biological enhancements gifted to us by our benefactors. This change came in the form of the Overwatch soldier. Dubbed transhuman or post-human by some, these units were enhanced with cybernetics, purged of their emotions, accepted memory replacement, conditioned to obey their leaders, and granted knowledge of battle tactics. These units were deployed both on Earth and other Combine territories across the universes. In numbers, they had the ability to wipe out almost anything in their path, a very valuable acquisition for our leaders. As for their role on Earth, they were stationed to monitor and protect important Combine strongholds within and outside of the cities. As of now, we know only a few, those being the Overwatch Nexus, the Citadel of City 17, and Nova Prospect. For the most loyal, tactile, and strongest soldiers, they were offered additional biological upgrades and augmentations. These Overwatch elite units were then stationed as the leaders of Overwatch squads and were found predominantly within the Citadel. Within other regions of City 17, specifically the Quarantine Zone, an area of the city sealed off completely, infested by Xenian flora and fauna, the Overwatch Commando Special Forces team were found. These consisted of the Combine Grunts. These were just slightly above the Civil Protection rank. The Combine Ordinal commanded the Grunts. The Combine Charger were designated to focus on tougher battles in which they were trained to use a large shield. And finally, the Combine Suppressor were typically brought in to help the Grunts, Ordinals, and Charger through heavy fire. These were rarely seen by anyone outside of the Quarantine Zone, and thus, even some Resistance members did not know they even existed. Just as they had done to countless species before, the Combine had improved what they had come across to be useful in their army. As for the rest of humanity, they simply lived in fear and paranoia as Combine propaganda was thrown at them from everywhere. This mostly came in the form of posters in the eyes of their neighbours who could not be trusted, and also from Breencasts. These messages, directly from Wallace Breen, reminded them that they did not need any control, that the Combine offered their species knowledge and advancement in something greater, and that it was a gift. Still, for those who rebelled or joined the Resistance, they were granted a different fate: to become a stalker. This process was brutal. It was a fate worse than death. Within Nova Prospect, these unwilling anti-citizens were adapted into a form that was useful for the Combine, instead of the issues they would have caused as a human. Their bodies were stripped of everything they did not need to function, and their thoughts were conditioned to perform tasks. They became mindless drones, simply cogs in the Combine machine. The Combine had perfectly fostered a society of fear, desperation, and hopelessness, all from practicing on other worlds, in which other alien societies may have also been in a very similar situation to the humans of Earth. While they had perfected and explored the psychology and biological means of what it meant to be human, Earth also had something else to offer them: our technology. To improve their union, our benefactors looked to the technology we had developed over our time on this planet. They saw our trains and cannibalized them into razor trains. These were used to transport technology, combat units, stalkers, advisor pods, and various other important cargo across the whole wasteland. Not only was this a fast way to travel across a Combine-controlled Earth, but it was also one of the safest, as the wasteland was riddled with Xenian flora and fauna, These creatures did not care about the war between humanity, Vortigaunts, and Combine. They just wanted to live and protect their territories. Restrictors were installed within sandy regions to push away any potential antlion nest that could form. These pounded the ground aggressively and overwhelmed the creature's ability to detect vibrations to navigate. This also helped the Combine unit sent in to capture the antlion for experimentation, to harvest their larvae for their healing qualities, and to milk them of an extract that appeared to naturally harm Xen's plant life, something that was desperately needed to reduce the dangers of the quarantine zone. Our military vehicles were adapted into the Armored Personnel Carrier, and a Ka-27 chopper was adapted into the Hunter chopper. Both of these vehicles became essential in the transportation of Combine units and in combat scenarios. Within the human settlements, the Combine created city scanners that were dispatched by civil protection units and higher. These flew around, surveyed the area, and took pictures of the citizens to make sure that everyone was where they were supposed to be. Manhacks were also dispatched by these units. These flying shredders cut up what they were told to target. Sentry turrets were programmed to protect important regions. Roller mines tracked down and sent out waves of electricity, and hopper mines, based on our human landmines, destroyed anything that came near them. Our human technology was just that, human. In the hands of the Combine, they took it, improved it, and used it against us in these new forms. If we are going to look at every Combine piece of technology, it is also important to talk about the Vault. This was essentially a giant prison brought in to capture and hold the G-Man, one of the stronger enemies of the Combine. This entity is still shrouded in mystery, and little was able to stop him or his employers from interfering in Combine plans. There was, however, one thing our benefactors knew was powerful: vortessence energy. To the look of the Combine, upon their acquisition of Earth, they had rediscovered the Vortigaunt who had fled them. With this species, they trapped them in containers and siphoned their vortessence as living batteries. This powered the Vault. The Combine's technology came in different forms. There was a lot of it, and it was needed in their ultimate goal to dominate all life in the multiverse. Yet, Earth had a piece of technology they wanted, but it was hidden behind the might of a resistance. The years of Combine occupation were difficult for the population of Earth. So much had been taken from them, but they were a part of something greater now. As Dr. Wallace Breen put it, for the first time ever, as a species, immortality was in our reach. This required radical rethinking and a revision of our genetic imperatives. Instinct coddled us and kept us safe in those hard Scrabble years when we hardened our sticks and cooked our first meals above a meager fire and stared at the shadows that leapt upon the cavern's walls. Our benefactors took these instincts away from us. Our ability to reproduce, think, and interact with the world were holding us back. Our instinct of what we saw as a threat was actually an opportunity. We should thank the Combine for removing our natural urges, to embrace their views and master ourselves as a species. Yet, there were many who did not agree with this sentiment. The Resistance. This group of outlaws worked in secret under the leadership of Dr. Eli Vance, Dr. Isaac Kleiner, and Dr. Arnie Magnuson, all previous employees of the Black Mesa Research Facility. Their hard years of work did pay off. They set up strong bases, an underground railroad that allowed citizens of City 17 to escape. They raided Combine bases for technology, and most importantly, they developed their own. Specifically within Kleiner's lab in the heart of City 17 and in Black Mesa East in the canals, they used their Black Mesa knowledge to create a teleporter. With all of the technology in the world, this would seem like a natural progression. However, this was something the Combine had not figured out. They had only been able to tunnel between universes on their goal to conquer all life. They had been unable to find a way to teleport from one location to another within a single universe. Years of fighting and growth allowed the Resistance more knowledge of their enemy, but with a human in control of all the other humans, the previous administrator of Black Mesa specifically, he had no idea how to strengthen his position and importance to the Combine. At one point, Dr. Judith Mossman became a member of the Resistance as a double agent. She was stationed within Black Mesa East and helped Eli with the development of his teleporter. With this knowledge, she began to construct one for the Combine in Nova Prospect. Based on the theory of teleportation technology back at Black Mesa, the Resistance used Xen as a dimensional slingshot to swing around the border world to another location in their dimension. Breen was desperate to understand how this technology actually worked. He wanted to provide this knowledge for the Combine, but the Resistance had not completely figured it out themselves. If the Combine could teleport across a single universe, their goal would be so much easier. Still, outside of their attempts to attain the teleportation technology, the Combine also had to deal with Resistance attacks and raids of their facility. They did, however, have significant victories that severely wounded the attempts of the group, one of which was Ravenholm. This town had once been home to a large Resistance community. Upon their discovery of this place, the Combine used an interesting tactic to take them out. The headcrabs of Xen had been an issue for the humanoid units in their ranks, but the Combine had not only experimented with and adapted some of these, but they had also utilized them into biological weapons. In what they called headcrab shells, they loaded up these little balls of flesh tightly and launched them into Resistance locations. They did not have to enter these territories themselves. The headcrabs and the zombies that came from them were dangerous enough. Around 20 years after the Combine's invasion, the Resistance perfected their localized teleportation technology. It was also on this day that Gordon Freeman appeared. He was a survivor of Black Mesa who had just disappeared. As quickly as he arrived, he gave the Resistance the push they needed to begin an uprising. The perfect collaboration between the Resistance, Gordon Freeman, the Vortigaunt, and even in the background, the G-Man, who steered Gordon, was enough to dismantle a lot of the control our benefactors had attained over the past 2 decades. Nova Prospect exploded, the Citadel in City 17 and all of those across the planet fell after the Dark Fusion Reactor became unstable. Because of this, the Combine's connection to the overworld was severed. In a last-ditch effort to open up a connection, the Combine units on Earth attempted to use the energy from the collapse of the Citadel to open a super portal, but the plan failed when the Resistance launched a rocket with a satellite array. 20 years worth of control was wiped out in a matter of days by the return of Gordon Freeman, his traversal of the wasteland, and a strong Resistance community. In the last known Combine action to occur in this universe, 2 advisors broke into the hangar of White Forest as Gordon Freeman and Alex Vance planned to travel to the north to explore the reports of a missing research vessel, the Borealis. A ship with technology on board that could aid the Resistance or the Combine, depending on who tracked it down first. In this moment, many things happened. An advisor pinned Alex and Gordon to a wall as the other plunged its tongue into the back of Eli's head. Not only did this kill him, but it also allowed the advisor to absorb parts of Eli's memories and knowledge of the Resistance. They may have been cut off from their overworld, but they could still fight and regain control somehow. To the look of Alex and Gordon, a Resistance unit, Dog, jumped from the roof and attacked the advisors. However, one escaped. In an adjusted timeline, Eli survived this encounter, but Alex disappeared. Her father knew that the G-Man must have had something to do with it, and in these final moments of the timeline, two things were for sure. The Resistance had to find Alex, and they also had to reach the Borealis first. The fate of their species depended on it. While the collapse of the Citadel, destruction of City-17, discovery of the existence of the Borealis, and generally, the loss of the connection to Earth was how Half-Life 2 Episode 2 put an end to the series for now, there was another piece of media released by our favourite Mark Laidlaw. Again, this is not considered canon. However, considering that there was a planned Half-Life 2 Episode 3 that was never released, when Mark posted Epistle 3 on his blog, fans could not help but notice the parallels between the characters' names, events, and plot points. Epistle 3 has been taken down from Mark's blog, but it is still accessible somewhere. This is not considered canon, but it did give an interesting perspective from an ex-writer of where the series could have concluded. I will not go through the whole story. I have a whole video for that linked below. Towards the end of the story, Gordon Freeman and Alex Vance discover the Borealis and discover that it has the ability to teleport through time and space. They decided that this technology was too powerful for the Resistance and the Combine to get their hands on, so they turned it into a time-traveling missile. The events are quick, but Judith is shot by Alex, Alex is taken away by the G-Man, and Gordon is left alone on the ship as it teleports into the Combine's overworld. The most important part of this story is this. Gordon sees just how vast the Empire was. They had managed to construct just a part of their empire around a star. They had created a Dyson sphere, a megastructure that encompassed a star and used the energy from it to power the structure. Even though the Borealis was powerful, Gordon ultimately knew that even when it hit the sphere at this speed, it would not even be registered by the Combine. Their empire and power was much larger than he had anticipated. This Dyson sphere was just a peak of their home universe. What did they have in others? To Gordon's luck, he was teleported out of the Borealis before it hit the sphere by a group of Vortigaunt, but he was left with the image he had seen. The Combine truly were an impossible force to defeat. Epistle 3 is a fantastic read, and it has split the community on whether it should be considered canon or not. Personally, it adds a little closure but not complete closure. I wanted to just at least mention Epistle 3 in this video because of how it described the Combine and their overworld. The power to construct a Dyson sphere. That feeling of loss and helplessness Gordon would have felt in that moment is immense. Even now, what we know of the mighty Combine Empire is limited. Sure, in this video, I have explored how they conquered worlds, transported the natural materials to other territories, adapted technology, and biologically adapted the creatures into something that better suited the Combine's needs. Yet, in the grand scheme of things, we only saw a glimpse of the Combine overworld in that brief moment at the top of City-17's Citadel before the collapse. We know that the Combine located on Earth were desperate to stop the Resistance during Half-Life 2 Episode 2. Although Gordon's actions led to the fall of the Citadel, it was the Combine who hoped to use the energy to send a transmission to the overworld in order to generate a super portal. They sent waves of their units to White Forest in order to stop the launch of the rockets that would close the portal as it formed. This was all we saw from Earth. If Epistle 3 was accurate in the fact that the Combine had constructed part of their civilization on a Dyson sphere, I have no idea how humanity would have stopped them. From the desperation we saw in Episode 2, we know that the Combine are scrambling and desperate. As of now, in the current state, the Combine are cut off from Earth. The Earth-based units were in a state of attempting to regroup, and the Borealis was the next stage in their plan, whatever that was. There was quite a bit of speculation and theory in this video, as well as information from the beta content, Breengrub and Epistle 3. I wanted to add as much information and context to the Combine as I could. I also made sure to say when things were canon or not. Outside of the series, Epistle 3 and Breengrub did give some interesting backstory to the Combine, their overworld, and what the advisors once were. I personally consider them my headcanon as I love the backstory of a species of dreamers who could psychically transform into any form they wanted to when they grew. I guess I like it more when you add the idea that the G-Man and his employers are the Shu Ulathoi who escaped. That is just another theory though. There were also cut aspects from the beta I feel added to the foundation of our benefactors, one of which was the air exchange. This structure was designed to siphon out our oxygen-based air and replace it with something toxic, a substance that was believed to allow the Combine advisor to breathe naturally on our world. The fact that they were limited to advisor pods in Half-Life 2 and the expansions is just another interesting part of their terraformation of our world. Sadly, it was cut. The combination of Nazi themes and the Orwellian 1984 idea really solidified just how terrifying, ruthless and powerful the Combine were. We only know of what they did to humanity. They broke them down physically and mentally. They were very efficient in their methods. I would love to see their other outposts on the other worlds and how they broke down the other species. Each world, I'm sure, would be different in how they function. Every society has different viewpoints, beliefs, and a way of life. The way the Combine broke down humanity would have been completely different to how they broke down other worlds. Valve are still sitting on a goldmine of potential games they could make. Sure, with Half-Life Alyx, they pushed the story forward by seconds. Even if they did it again with another game, maybe on another world, maybe as Adrian Shepard, Father Gregory, it would still add to the amazing universe they have built. This is a longer video. It is as extensive as I could make it without going into every tiny detail. I do have other videos that have explored a lot of the regions, characters and creatures mentioned. I will say that it was hard to stay on track with just the Combine as they essentially fall into almost every story. That was everything I wanted to say really. If you enjoyed this video, then I would love you to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know what you thought in the comments section below. Finally, I would like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Jonas, Lewis, Queen Arby, Fluffy the Dragon, Ruben Mendoza, Oren X, Azu, Comfy, Yauli Rodriguez, 501st Clone Boy, Drakey Phoenix, Average Soul, Jusper Timry, Imperial Embers, Jimsy, and Canufex. What do you think of the Combine? Are you a part of the Resistance? And where is your base located? Let me know in the comments below. Glory to the Combine. This is where our story ends. Check back soon for another one.